Welcome to JGL Law for You. This podcast is sponsored by Greenwald and Laake, a suburban Maryland law firm that has been representing clients throughout the DC metropolitan area and across the country for close to 50 years. JGL Law for You is a podcast by lawyers, yes, but not for lawyers only. On JGL Law for You, we will bring you up close and personal with our lawyers and some special guests who will be discussing how to navigate the many legal processes, developments in the law, other current events, and how they may affect you, your family, or your business. Today, we're talking with Anne Grover and Pat Dragga, two of JGL's family law practitioners, about a very important subject, how to best choose a lawyer to represent you in a divorce or other family law matter. Anne Grover is a principal in JGL's family law department. She sees clients at the worst stage in their lives and tries to ensure that they understand and have input in the process, something that is just not intuitive to most people. Anne believes that it is a top priority to navigate the system, aggressively represent her clients, and talk them through the legal process. Pat Dragga has practiced family law exclusively for 40 years, primarily in Montgomery County, Maryland, representing high net worth individuals. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers and recently named as one of the top 100 lawyers in DC super lawyers. I want to welcome you both today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, David.
So let's jump right in. I'll toss this out to the two of you. Here I am at home. I've been home for a while. I'm not in a happy relationship, and I'm thinking about separating and possibly divorcing. What should I do?
A lot of people in today's technological age will go online. They'll do Google searches. They'll look for top attorneys, aggressive attorneys in their geographical area. Some people will go to different sites, such as Martindale Hubbell or Avo. There are a lot of different sites where attorneys are rated by other attorneys, by legal practitioners, as well as by their clients. There are some cautionary notes, however, if you're doing online research. Pat, do you want to jump in about some of those problems?
Thanks, Anne, and thank you, David. This may be generational a little bit. For so many years, the referrals for family lawyers came from personal friends, individuals that you trusted. Anne and I were talking about this, that if I want to find something important, I ask one person who I know well. My children want to know what 100 people think, and they don't know them at all. And so we have crowdsourcing and the internet, and it really cuts down the amount of interviews you have to do, perhaps the amount of money you have to spend to find a lawyer who is simpatico with your feelings about a very important part of your life. I just feel that it's not a substitute for a personal interaction in an initial consultation. One of the problems that, David, you mentioned was we're talking about people, nice people, very good people, but in the most difficult time or one of the most difficult times in their lives. And so I'm always careful when somebody gives a recommendation that's negative. The question is whether it's more a reflection of their experience or the quality of the legal advice that they got.
A lot of times what you hear about these internet reviews, right, is that the only people who write reviews are the people that are really, really thrilled. And then on the other hand, the people who are miserably unhappy and the great masses in the middle don't take the time to say much of anything. So I'm wondering how accurate, if I'm looking at those reviews about Anne Grover or Pat Dragga, how accurate or encompassing they might be.
That's a great point, because sometimes an opposing party who was dissatisfied with the result will write a review for their spouse's attorney. There really is no way that those opinions are vetted by anyone to ensure that they are accurate, that the person was not representing their spouse. So you've got to really take it with a grain of salt. Instead of going to online reviews, you're better off thinking about what are the main issues that I need to deal with in my situation. And then go to that person's website. Look at whether they seem to have a breadth of knowledge in that subject area. You want to make sure you find somebody that's a good fit, especially if you've got kind of an individualized issue.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. So for example, if if I'm in the military, or if I work for the World Bank, or if I have a child with special needs, should I be looking for somebody who might have specific interests or experience with cases, or does that not really matter? Or, family lawyer is a family lawyer.
I personally think it's one of the most important things one has to consider. Family law, as you can imagine, like the human experience of being in a family, is very broad. And there are plenty of different sub areas that require more in-depth knowledge. Lawyers are not good at saying that they're expert in a certain sub area. But I think that, as Anne mentioned, you can look at the information on the internet and also in your interview to determine whether special needs children is a good example. That's a very specific area that requires understanding of what services are available and what other issues that may arise in a custody case involving a special needs child. Small business is another area where valuation is important. I don't think you want a lawyer to learn about how to value a small business. It's probably better to have somebody who has some experience in that particular sub area.
Okay.
And to jump into that a little bit, Pat talked about your example with special needs children, but David, you had mentioned also if you're a member of the military or if you work for the World Bank, all of these areas have very particularized rules that if your attorney isn't familiar with them can really, really hurt you down the line. So let's say that you were expecting to get a portion of someone's pension. You could be precluded from doing that if your attorney doesn't know the right way to go about getting you the relief you want.
So if I get to the point, right, that now I've done my research, I've spoken with friends, and I've narrowed my choices down, at least without talking to anyone, to 2 or 3 folks who do what we all do. What questions do you think I ought to ask when I sit down for that interview in terms of trying to find out if you have had experience where businesses have had to be valued, or you have had experience with children who are on medication and there's issues about going back and forth and things of that nature between parents' houses, or with the military, as you mentioned. What should I be asking other than the obvious? Have you had cases with this or that? Is there anything when I'm sitting in your office? Is there anything specific you guys would suggest that the potential client looks to ask in that scenario?
You seem to be presuming something that we've talked about and have reviewed in the past over and over again in our cases. As Anne has said, what you need is a very specific number of goals. And if you use those goals as a way to establish an interview process for a lawyer, it's generally thought that you're going to find people who either understand the material or you're going to know that maybe this is not the right lawyer for you in that kind of case. As far as goals go, I have always thought that when I'm talking to clients, there seem to be 2 kinds of goals. One's positive, which is the one we usually think about. I need alimony. My spouse has a hardware store. I need to get valued. My child has special needs. I need somebody who knows that material and can get me a good result. Another way of looking at goals are negative goals. And the one I hear most often is, I hear going to court's terrible. I just don't want to go to court. And that's not a bad way to look at it. You just have to understand that it's a process here, and almost no cases end up going through an actual trial. But the concept and the process requires that there be a court in the background to help you set out what the negotiation is going to be like.
And another way of looking at the goals that you write out, David, is if you've got your goals in your priority list when you go into the meeting with an attorney, a lot of this is going to be dependent on the responses or answers they give you. Are you able to understand them? Is it clear? Can you ask follow-up questions? Did they give you both a broader, these are the types of issues the court will hear? Let me get a little more particularized for your specific case. If you don't understand what the attorney is saying to you, it's probably not a good fit.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to ask next. What about, If I'm looking for somebody, I might meet 2 or 3 folks that sort of click, check all those boxes that you're talking about. They understand my situation. They have experience in that area. How important is rapport in a relationship with a family lawyer? I mean, if you're calling an electrician, they fix the electricity, or a plumber, and they fix, I don't know that you need to be simpatico with that person, to borrow from Joe Biden. But how important is rapport in a family law case?
Well, David, I think rapport is one of the most important things that a client needs to have with their attorney. If you don't trust or understand your attorney and what he or she is saying, what is already one of the most difficult things that you can go through in your life can be just miserable. It's so personal. We're talking about people's children, their ability to pay their bills. These are very, very serious issues. And if you don't have a good rapport with your attorney, you're never going to feel heard. It's going to be an excruciating process that really is exacerbated by that.
One of the ways I look at that particular issue of seeing things somewhat similarly with the lawyer is just imagine all your other experiences and how you seek advice. Sooner or later, the lawyer is going to have to tell you something that might be difficult for you to hear. And in that moment, it's going to serve you much better if you've gotten to be comfortable with that person and you understand that difficult to hear advice comes from a good place and somebody who's really just looking out for you, even though you may not like what you hear.
How does somebody schedule an appointment? Do they just make a phone call and come in, or is there anything that your office needs to do before that appointment can take place?
David, for anyone that is looking to set up a meeting with an attorney, they've got to call into that attorney's office to schedule an appointment, but more importantly, so that a conflicts check can be run. Because as everyone knows, you don't want to meet with an attorney who your spouse has already met with, may have engaged, and give them information which otherwise they would never have or wouldn't have until the case develops, as the case may be. So setting up a conflicts check is absolutely essential. But the other thing that is important for people looking to make an appointment is some attorneys charge for initial consultations, and some attorneys will give you a free consultation.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this along the same lines. Why is that? Why do some lawyers charge for the consultation and why do others not? And for me as a potential client, should that matter? I mean, obviously, I'd rather get something for free than pay for it. But is there a reason not to weigh that factor?
David, I think it's important to weigh that factor. Everybody wants something for free. That's very appealing on a number of levels. But the old adage, you get what you pay for, is sometimes true. So if you've got a free consultation, that person may be more invested in telling you what they think you want to hear to get you to sign and actually pay some money, as opposed to someone you've already paid for their time. They have no vested interest in trying to fluff up what you can expect to get. They may be more apt to be honest and shoot from the hip regarding what your prospective prospects are.
So it's not a time to be penny wise and dollar foolish, so to speak, when trying to pick who you want to be working with.
Absolutely.
I certainly agree with that. I think that an initial consultation is an investment of your time and in most cases of your money. And it's important, I certainly think it's important for the client to feel like he or she got his money's worth, whether or not they engage our firm. Most importantly, I think you would look at the search for a lawyer as a search for information, not promises. As Anne was saying, it's so easy to sound like a salesman when you're trying to talk somebody into or to hiring you to represent them. Most importantly, you want to ask yourself, am I receiving the information I need to make a reasonable choice? And I think if the answer is yes, that's a good interview. That's a good relationship you might want to pursue.
And people, I'm sure, ask you every time they come in, how much is it going to cost, right? How much is it going to cost me? How do you answer that question? Because as we all know, it may vary. So what do you tell folks when they ask that?
And what do you tell folks?
I tell people that I can't give them any guarantees. The unfortunate thing about family law is this is some sort of hourly fee that is charged in most instances. There are specific carve-outs for people that do very limited work for a flat fee, but family law attorneys are not permitted in the ethical rules to do any sort of contingent fee or results-based fee arrangement with our clients. So anyone that gives you some sort of a hard number, I would really take that with more than a grain of salt.
Along those lines, Anne, is that when you mentioned ethical rules, is that true? Because we're going to have folks listening, from one end of the country to the other. Is that true across in every state, or is it possible that in certain jurisdictions, lawyers may be willing or able or not ethically precluded from taking family cases on a flat fee?
That may vary by jurisdiction. I think the vast majority of jurisdictions don't permit that. But because family law is state-driven, the states make the rules. So in Maryland, we've got the Maryland Rules of Professional Conduct, and they say that's an absolute no-no.
I'd just like to say, if you think about it, you're asking somebody, what's this going to cost? Most of the cases don't get litigated, they get settled. And a settlement is something between you and your spouse. And so the lawyer is there and he knows very little about you and virtually nothing about your spouse except what you've told him or her. And we're trying to figure out how much is this going to cost. And the question is, how much is it going to cost me to get my spouse to agree with me? And I think if you look at it that way, you're going to see that that's a pretty tough question to answer. But from a cost benefit standpoint, as you go along, you have to evaluate each step in the process, approximately what it's going to cost and what's the benefit to this particular divorce that we're trying to get in the best way possible.
Last question. Are those steps in the process and potential for cost, are those places that you folks will speak with your clients about before taking a jump, so to speak, and incurring this additional cost on whatever the project may be?
Absolutely, David. Your attorney should be open with you about things that are going to drive up the cost of representation. Discovery is one area where everyone will see a spike in the cost for them. Going to trial. There's a lot of time that is inherent in getting ready for trial and then trying the case. But you as the client need to be informed. You need to be intentional. There are things that you as a client can do to try to keep costs reasonable or to make things more economical. For example, if your attorney bills at an hourly rate and they've got the minimum amount of time that they will bill for something is, say, 0.1 or 0.2 hours, you want to make sure that if you can bundle the questions that you're sending by email, that if you can keep that to one period of time instead of sending one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, you got to take responsibility for managing costs in that way.
And I tell folks also, that there's lots of good therapists out there that don't cost as much as divorce lawyers, and oftentimes many of those questions are better asked of those folks, or those issues are raised with them. But I want to thank you both for joining us today. And in the event that people out there want to reach you, can you tell us quickly the best way to reach out to you to talk about potentially their case that's coming up? Anne?
Absolutely. Any potential clients are able to go to my website, which is www.jgllaw.com. And they can also call to schedule an appointment and speak with my legal assistant at 240-399-7896.
Pat?
Yes, I can also be reached through the website for the law firm. And my phone is 240-399-7900.
Excellent. And again, thanks to both of you. Thanks to everyone out there for listening in. Hope that you join us next time. I'm David Bullitt, and this is JGL Law for You.